My name is David Harrison. I'm 46 years old, and 6 months ago my life was a house of cards I helped build with my own hands, never realizing the foundation was rotting beneath me, poisoned by the two people I trusted most. Looking your wife in the eyes while she signs divorce papers claiming there's nothing of value left drains something out of your soul. But watching her brother, my own brother-in-law, smirk while adjusting a silk tie paid for with my hard work, that awakens something far more dangerous. They took everything they could see. What they didn't realize was the fatal mistake they made, underestimating what I could uncover once I started digging beneath the surface of their lies. She thought she was clever, he thought he was untouchable, and both of them believed I was just the man who paid the bills and kept his mouth shut. My brother-in-law helped my unfaithful wife hide a fortune during the divorce, moving pieces across a chessboard he believed he controlled. But now, as I'm telling you this, federal investigators are pounding on his front door over a fraud scheme they never saw coming, not even in their worst nightmares. Betrayal has a price, and they're about to pay for it with their freedom. I'm not looking for forgiveness. I'm not interested in a truce. And reconciliation? That was buried the day they tried to erase me. All I want is for the full weight of the law to finish crushing what's left of their arrogance. If you like stories where betrayal has consequences and justice arrives without warning, make sure to like and subscribe. Here we share real stories of revenge and lessons that are never forgotten. To understand how we got to this point, I have to explain who I was before the ground disappeared beneath my feet. For 15 years, I was the kind of man who didn't ask questions because he believed he already had the right answers. I worked 14 hours a day at my logistics consulting firm, building what I believed was a financial shield around my family. Rebecca, my wife, was always the picture of elegance and unwavering support, or at least that's how I chose to see her. She didn't work, or rather her job was managing our social life and our home, something she did with surgical precision that, looking back now, was the mark of a calculating mind that never truly rested. We lived well, very well. We had the kind of life people envy during weekend dinners, the perfect house, trips to exclusive vineyards, and a stability that seemed untouchable. But within that environment, there was always a shadow I chose to ignore out of pure convenience. Her brother, my brother-in-law, Andrew. He was always the entrepreneur of the family, the man with brilliant business ideas that always needed one last financial push. Andrew was a financial advisor by profession, but his true specialty was refined parasitism. He was always around, always flattering, always present in our important decisions. Rebecca adored him, and I, wanting to keep peace at home, and because back then money seemed abundant, often allowed him to manage certain minor investments from our joint accounts. My mistake was believing that family loyalty was a shared value. It wasn't. To them, I was a goldmine with an expiration date. The atmosphere at home began to change in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. Rebecca grew more distant, but not in a way that immediately raises suspicion. It was a technical distance. Less eye contact, more time with her phone locked, and a strange insistence that I needed to rest more and delegate control of our personal finances to Andrew so I wouldn't stress myself out. She kissed me on the cheek before bed, with a coldness I mistook for the fatigue of passing years. I remember a dinner a few months before the disaster. Andrew sat at our table drinking wine I had paid for, talking about offshore accounts and asset protection structures. I remember the way Rebecca looked at him, with a complicity that at the time seemed like simple sibling pride. He said that in this world, anyone who doesn't hide what they have risks losing it. I laughed, raised my glass, and said that honesty was my greatest asset. Andrew smiled at me, a slow smile filled with a superiority I didn't understand until it was too late. At that table, my downfall was already being prepared. They were already moving money, draining accounts I funded with my sweat, and building a web of lies that would leave my name in the mud while they walked away with the prize. I was the perfect provider, generous, busy, and blind. Rebecca knew exactly which buttons to press so I wouldn't ask questions. If I mentioned that credit card expenses had increased, she would talk about a supposed renovation or an investment Andrew was securing for our retirement. And I trusted her. I trusted because at 46, You want to believe you've built something solid. I didn't want to see that my wife was more interested in my account balances than in our relationship, or that her brother was using his advisor license to build a financial tunnel through which my future was quietly disappearing. We were at the top, or so I believed, while they had already packed their parachutes, ready to jump and leave me alone in a plane running out of engines. Routine was my anesthesia. I woke up, went to the office, closed deals, and returned to a house that felt increasingly empty of soul, but full of expensive objects. Rebecca began traveling more frequently, for shopping, or to visit her mother, always accompanied by Andrew's advice on how to handle the expenses of those trips. I, immersed in my work, appreciated that she had her own space. What a fool I was. On those trips, money wasn't just being spent, it was being moved. Foreign accounts were opened, crypto assets were purchased, and powers of attorney were signed that I never even saw. The stage was set. The balance was an illusion held together by fragile threads they were about to cut with a coldness that still chills my blood today. The collapse didn't begin with a scream. It began with absolute silence. One afternoon when I arrived home, I found the door open and Rebecca's walk-in closet completely empty. Not a single perfume bottle, not a hanger out of place. On the dining table, a cream-colored envelope held the divorce filing. It felt like someone had hit me in the stomach with a steel hammer. But the worst part wasn't the petition itself, it was the attached documents. Financial statements where our fortune, the one I had sweated over for a decade and a half, seemed to have vanished into thin air. According to those papers, we were on the verge of technical bankruptcy. When I tried to access our joint accounts, the system kept returning the same message: insufficient funds. Desperate, I called Rebecca. No answer. I called Andrew, my brother-in-law. He picked up with a cold, professional voice, completely devoid of the familiarity we had pretended to share for years. He told me with a calm that sent chills down my spine that Rebecca felt suffocated and that on legal advice, all communication should go through his office. That's when I understood. The man who sat at my table and drank my wine was now the architect of my demolition. Days later, at the first mediation meeting, I saw her. Rebecca sat across from me, shielded by Andrew. She didn't look at me once. She simply stared at her perfectly manicured nails, while her brother laid out a web of financial lies I could hardly believe. They presented documents showing alleged bad investments of mine, debts that didn't exist, and transfers I had never authorized, but bearing a signature that perfectly imitated my own. They were stealing from me in plain sight, using the very laws that are supposed to protect us. "David, you need to understand," Andrew said, leaning across the table with a cynical smile. "The money disappeared because of your poor decisions. Rebecca is just trying to preserve what little remains for her future. Don't make this harder than it already is." My blood boiled. I felt a dull rage, a pressure in my chest threatening to explode, but I didn't shout. I stayed still, watching my wife, the woman who once swore loyalty to me, nod silently at every word that came out of that con artist's mouth. She knew the money was hidden. She knew Andrew had moved it through shell companies and accounts I couldn't trace. The humiliation was complete when the judge, seeing the evidence presented by a licensed financial advisor like Andrew, issued temporary orders. I was instructed to leave our primary residence. I packed my life into 4 suitcases, while they kept the house, the furniture, and control of the remaining assets. Soon I found myself in a rented apartment, accounts frozen and my professional reputation under attack, because Andrew made sure rumors spread through the industry that I was losing my mind and squandering company capital. What hurt the most wasn't the money. It was the detail. One afternoon I returned to the house to collect my last personal belongings and saw them through the window. They were in the backyard, toasting. Rebecca laughed at something Andrew said while they reviewed documents on a tablet. It was the image of victory. They felt untouchable. They had taken the fruit of my last 15 years and left me with the empty shell of a life. She didn't even have the decency to tell me she no longer loved me. She preferred to destroy me so she wouldn't have to share the spoils. The eviction was both symbolic and physical. That night, alone in that cold apartment, I understood that this wasn't a divorce. It was a coordinated heist. My wife wasn't a victim of routine. She was an active accomplice, and her brother was the mastermind of a criminal operation. They had taken my home, my status, and my peace. They left me alone with my anger, believing a defeated man has no strength to fight back. But they were wrong about one fundamental thing. A man who has lost everything no longer fears consequences. The silence they interpreted as surrender was, in reality, the beginning of my reconstruction. I stayed in the darkness of that empty apartment for 3 nights, not to grieve, but to recalibrate my mind. They expected me to collapse, to drown myself in alcohol or sink into depression, but my intelligence is a muscle that only tightens under pressure. I knew that to defeat a man like Andrew, I didn't need a conventional lawyer. I needed a financial surgeon. I reached out to an old contact, a man named Daniel Brooks, who specialized in forensic audits and didn't ask uncomfortable questions as long as his fees were covered. I gave him the only thing they hadn't managed to take from me: my remote access to my company's legacy servers and 5 years of corporate card records. "If there's a trail, I'll find it," Daniel told me, with the cold certainty of someone who sees life through spreadsheets. My plan wasn't simply to recover the money. My plan was to turn the very system they used to rob me into their own prison. While they celebrated, I began living like a ghost. I cut my expenses to the bone, kept a low profile at work, and let them believe I was finished. Patience is a form of control, and in that game I held all the leverage. The first crack appeared 3 weeks later. Daniel discovered that Andrew hadn't just hidden my money. He was using it as collateral for his own high-risk investment schemes. The mistake of arrogant men is believing they can outsmart the system forever. Andrew had moved part of the assets into a shell company supposedly dedicated to technology consulting. But he made a technical oversight. He used the same IP address from his personal office to execute cryptocurrency transfers. It was a loose thread, and I began pulling it with surgical calm. I didn't go to the authorities. Not yet. I knew that if I wanted total victory, the fraud needed to be so undeniable that neither of them would have a legal escape. I hired a private investigator to follow Andrew. That's when I discovered he wasn't just scheming for Rebecca. He was quietly diverting part of the stolen funds into an account under the name of a mistress Rebecca didn't even know existed. Betrayal within betrayal. The picture was perfect. A con artist deceiving his own accomplice. Sitting at my desk, staring at the photos the investigator handed me, I felt a cold satisfaction run down my spine for the first time in months. Every move I made was calculated, never impulsive. I assembled a file containing every transfer, every forged signature, and every email Andrew believed he had erased. But my masterstroke wasn't legal, it was strategic. I knew Andrew was searching for a new investor for a fictitious real estate project, a way to clean the money he had taken from me. Through an intermediary, I arranged for him to receive an offer from a supposed foreign investor interested in injecting capital. The investor didn't exist. It was a trap designed to make Andrew put his intentions and the origin of his funds in writing. Meanwhile, Rebecca continued sending emails through her attorneys, demanding more, trying to squeeze whatever remained of my logistics firm. I responded with evasive messages, playing weak, asking for time to recover. That made them lower their guard. They felt so secure in their superiority that they began making rookie mistakes. They stopped covering their tracks, convinced I was a beaten dog that would never bite again. What they didn't realize was that I was counting every dollar, every move, and every lie, waiting for the exact moment when the weight of their own greed would bring everything crashing down. Revenge isn't served cold. It's engineered piece by piece until it's strong enough to crush the one who set it in motion. The day of the climax came without shouting, only the metallic sound of reality knocking on Andrew's door. I was 3 blocks away, watching from a screen as the castle they built with my money collapsed in real time. Thanks to Daniel's forensic audit and the evidence gathered through the fictitious investor, we didn't just have proof of a domestic betrayal, we had documentation of tax fraud and money laundering schemes involving 3 of Andrew's shell companies. I had timed the delivery of the evidence to coincide with a critical meeting. Andrew was in his office trying to close a deal using what remained of Rebecca's funds when federal agents walked in. It wasn't a movie scene. It was an administrative execution. They led him out in handcuffs, wearing that same silk tie he loved so much, but this time there was no trace of superiority on his face. He looked pale, shaken, staring at the cameras like a cornered animal that couldn't understand how the trap had closed around him. Meanwhile, Rebecca was at what used to be our home, probably planning her next purchase. I sent her a single text message, the first in months. "Check the news and call your lawyer, the money is gone." The account Andrew had created for her, where they hid nearly $2 million, had been frozen under an emergency court order my legal team secured 10 minutes before the raid. Not only did she lose access to the stolen funds, but she was now listed as a co-conspirator in forged signatures and asset concealment under federal investigation. She called me in desperation, 10 times. 20 times. Eventually, I answered. Her voice was no longer that of the elegant woman who looked at me with disdain during mediation. It was broken, filled with raw fear. "David, please. Andrew says this is a mistake. Help me. They're going to take the house." "I have nothing," she sobbed. I remained silent for a moment, letting the weight of that silence settle. "Do you remember when you said there was nothing of value left in our marriage?" I asked calmly, surprising even myself. "You were right. Even you hold no value for me now. Good luck with the fraud charges." And I hung up. The impact was devastating for both of them. Because it was an interstate financial fraud case, bail was astronomical. Andrew, the great strategist, tried to shift all the blame onto Rebecca to save his license, but I made sure the emails where he instructed her step by step on how to deceive me landed directly on the prosecutor's desk. They turned on each other. In less than 48 hours, the siblings who had united to destroy me were facing opposite directions, accusing one another in separate interrogation rooms. Justice wasn't fast, but it was absolute. The house was seized to cover federal fines and the restitution I claimed. Rebecca went from luxury dinners to living in a small apartment paid for by her mother, waiting for a trial that could cost her years of freedom. Andrew lost his license, his reputation, and eventually his freedom. Seeing his booking photo, hair disheveled, eyes sunken, felt like compensation for every hour I spent working while they planned my downfall. I didn't feel joy. I felt order. The world made sense again, because the parasites had finally been removed from the host. Today I wake up in a place they can no longer touch. My company is in the process of recovering, and my name has been cleared of every stain Andrew tried to throw at me. Rebecca attempted to reach out one last time just a few weeks ago. She sent me a handwritten letter talking about the years we shared, about human mistakes and the possibility of a civil conversation. I never opened it. I fed it straight into the paper shredder in my office while finishing a sales report. There's nothing more dangerous than someone who only remembers your value after losing their own. The consequences for them have come as a steady drip of failures. Andrew was sentenced to real prison time for fraud and document forgery. His contacts and so-called friends disappeared the moment the first headlines appeared. Rebecca, meanwhile, now lives in the shadow of what she once was. I'm told she works in an administrative office, earning a fraction of what she used to spend on a single pair of shoes in her glory days. No more trips, no more gala dinners, and most importantly, no one left to deceive. I learned that trust is not a gift to be handed out blindly. It's an asset that must be audited constantly. At 46, I've lost my innocence, but I've gained a clarity that's priceless. People often ask if I feel guilty for being so relentless, for triggering the downfall of the woman I shared my life with for 15 years. My answer is always the same. I didn't destroy them. I simply turned on the light so the world could see how they were destroying themselves with their own greed. There are no happy endings in stories like this, only fair ones. My house feels quieter now, but it's a clean silence, free from the noise of whispered lies behind my back. I'm not looking for a new relationship, and I'm not trying to recover lost time. Time isn't recovered. It's used wisely from this point forward. I look toward the future with the calm of a man who no longer has hidden enemies sitting at his table. They thought they were taking my fortune, but in reality they removed a dead weight that had been dragging me down. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's watching life collect its debts. If this story felt as intense to you as it was for me to live it, Make sure to leave a like and tell me in the comments what you would have done. And if you're not subscribed yet, turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story.